During my time at the PAiR Residency in Pavlosta, supported by the VV Foundation, my research took the form of site visits combined with reading texts and viewing films that would further develop my proposed writing project. This body of research is leading me to experiment with speculative fiction, and in particular the subgenre of folk horror in the Latvian context. Folk horror is a term that has become synonymous with a wide variety of culture in recent years. From film and television to literature and music, the broadness of the description belies its potential to talk about a number of current issues. Though its description initially implies a symbiotic relationship between the narratives of folklore and horror, its real binding feature is its relationship to place and landscape. Yet within these portrayals of the weird, the eerie, and the uncanny, a sense of place and landscape still resides at their core. A sense of place can be used as both a positive and a negative force in terms of the narratives of the work, yet the overall effect upon an audience's perception of landscape can be argued as being wholly positive. To my mind, this has three overall effects. 1. Building a new respect for landscapes and the environment. 2. Remythologizing a perception of landscape as a place of enchantment and somewhere to explore through the prism of fantasy, creating a general re-engagement with place. And 3. Emphasizing landscapes outside of typically appreciated topographies. Adam Scoville has developed a structure called the folk horror chain to discern characteristics that apply to films and literature that could belong to this subgenre. Folk horror conjures many narrative and formal possibilities. It has the potential to challenge fixed identity, in particular as the weird and eerie elements, nod to Mark Fisher, are murky and point to the speculative, as well as highlight and bring forth a scale of time and a relationship to land that is nuanced and entwined with a multiplicity of stories. Often the past is unruly and inscribed on the landscape, and just as often a reckoning lurks nearby. To this point, I'm reminded of one of Don Keatley's 6 theses on plant horror. Plants lurk in our blind spot. Plants or rocks often reside in our peripheries, they're witnesses, and perhaps more. The rocks are beyond slow, beyond strong, and yet yielding to a soft green breath as powerful as a glacier, the mosses wearing away their surfaces, grain by grain, bringing them slowly back to sand. There is an ancient conversation going on between mosses and rocks. Poetry, to be sure. Robin Wall Kimmerer suggests a perspective shift in her encounter with mosses on the rocks, one that considers both slowed time and magnified scale. Kimmerer bears witness to a type of conversation interaction of beings that exist and function beyond the human register. Re-engagement with what you may have missed in the fields and forests around you, on the rocks in your periphery, may bring about a witnessing of ancient conversations between more than human forces. I visited 11 sites of ancient, often pagan, significance in the Kurzema region. Some sites were difficult to find. Some had clear signage and pathways. Some had graffiti contributing to their prism of temporalities and functions. Photo, video, audio documentation was taken of each site visited. Additionally, I visited the archives of Latvian folklore, on site at the National Library in Riga. I'm planning to write short episodic fictions structured around each site visit and the stories unearthed. My maternal and paternal grandparents relocated to Canada from Latvia following the Second World War. My parents met as adults with a shared background of displacement. My maternal side came from the Kurzeme region. The narrator is a fictionalized, unnamed version of myself. Beyond visiting sites of ancient significance and learning regional folklore, the underlying and unspoken motivation for the narrator's research trip to Kurzeme is a search for something unnamed and unknown that will remedy their feeling of in-betweenness. I plan to experiment with folk horror as a lens to uncover what is in the landscape of the site visits. With this project, I intend to be careful of and avoid overt authenticity claims and romanticizing notions of nationalism and national identity. Instead, this project seeks to embrace the muddiness, time sludge, layered sediments of identity and story that folk horror can uncover. Unearthing the unexpected will be a primary focus of the narratives. There will be interrupting counter-narratives, or interludes, derived from the folk stories researched and the more than human elements witnessed in situ. The proposed outcome will be a publication of these texts in book form, with the possibility of further developing the text into a moving image project. I'll introduce 2 sites visited and their associated stories. In an overgrown abandoned graveyard in the woods, there stands an upright moss-covered stone with crosses carved into its surface. There is a tale about this stone, with many variations. A gender-fluid child died and was buried in the cemetery. It is unknown whether the child was murdered, but one might suspect so, as their spirit is restless. After the burial, the villagers were awakened in the night by a ceaseless screaming sound coming from the graveyard. A priest ordered that a stone with a carved cross in its surface be placed on the grave. The harrowing wails did not stop. Some say it took 13 crosses carved into the stone for the wails to fade away. The stone has not been officially dated. It has been suggested that the story originates from the transition period from old ways to Christianity. It was difficult finding this stone, and it wasn't until orange vest-clad hunters appeared on the road and offered assistance that the site could be reached. Additionally, there was a small clear plastic box tucked behind the cross stone. Inside were trinkets and paper with a pencil. The paper contained a list of names. This box and its contents are placed at the site as part of a scavenger hunt game called geocaching. Participants use a GPS to find unique sites across the world and mark their accomplishment by signing in at the cache, usually a waterproof box. They may decide to take and/or leave trinkets as well. The helpful hunters and geocaching may be incorporated into the narrative for this site visit. It used to be a very large great stone, so large it was in the list of the 10 greatest stones of Latvia. From the former huge stone there are only remains, of which the largest one is situated in its original place, now in a huge pit, which is mostly filled up with water. The remaining stone in the pit is like a cliff island rising high above the water level. Other smaller splits of the stone can be seen in the forest all around the big pit, creating a peculiar landscape. It is very likely that during the Soviet occupation the huge stone was split in an effort to use the material for a monument. There is a tale about the stone that within it a werewolf lives and comes out at midnight and at midday to hunt. There are many regional stories of werewolves. Some tell of incidents during World War II in which werewolves helped soldiers to escape from approaching forces. There is also a unique published account of a werewolf trial in the 17th century in which the accused doesn't fit common tropes of werewolf beliefs. The accused considered their role to be as a dog of God, and stated that their task had been to protect cereal crops from wizards, witches, and the devil, who take cereal blossoms down to hell, and that the werewolf's duty was to retake the blossoms. Though these stories are not necessarily linked to this particular stone, the werewolf is a being of in-betweenness, and may take many roles in stories, even that of a protector or a guide. The werewolf stone is quite accessible. It's well signed, has a rest area, and a fire pit. There's a carving on a tree at the site. It resembles what might be considered black metal graffiti, a symbol of some kind scratched in bark. My work on this project continues. Thank you to the VV Foundation for the opportunity to begin this research and develop my project while in residence in Pavolosta.